Oh,
Yeah,
look at this.
there we go.
We pulled it off.
I love it.
All right, let me adjust my volume here so I can hear what you're saying. Oh, this makes me happy.
Me too.
Who says masters athletes can't use technology?
You'd be shocked. Hold on. I love it.
Well, no matter what, it's a success. It's already a success.
I mean, the chance to be able to catch up with you too, boy.
Come on, so I guess for the viewers at home, I tried to reach out to you like 3 weeks ago because it had just been forever, just to catch up, just to chat. Uh, and then yesterday, part of the train and diet program was 200-meter repeats, so you were always on my mind when I run, because I'm one of those odd CrossFitters that actually enjoys running. And so I decided to reach out to you and just give you a call because selfishly, I always learn something. That's a lie. I always learn more than one thing whenever we chat with you. So yeah, figured we might as well share it with the world, right?
I love it. Yeah. So when I heard you were doing some 200s, I was actually really I was pleasantly surprised. But you're always one. You've always been one that wants to learn and
Yeah, man.
think of things maybe differently and looking for better options. And it's cool to be able to catch up and talk about your workout.
Oh, for sure. And I guess in case some folks watching here through Linchpin, I assume everybody knows who you are, but give us your quick 30-second resume bio. Why in the world would anybody want to listen to you about running?
My background is in triathlons, so swimming, biking, and running. As an athlete, I raced as a professional for 8 years. Had some success, longer distances. So Ironman in Hawaii, I've done that. I want to say, I don't know, 9 times, 10 times maybe. Um,
And that's the full Ironman. We're talking, what are the distances?
it's a 2.4 mile ocean swim, 112-mile bike ride, and then it's a 26.2 mile marathon. And that marathon, if you are competitive, you start it really at around 1 in the afternoon, 12:30 in the afternoon. So the heat of the day in Hawaii, and you run across the lava fields. And yeah, so I did that. I won Ironman Brazil. I mean, if you race enough, you're going to have some good performances, but that gave me some good insights into endurance type training. And then I got an opportunity, as you know, with Jason Khalipa to coach him in CrossFit in 2013. That was my 5th year in the sport. So I'm now 11 years in to CrossFit as an athlete.
And you've definitely had the opportunity to coach a whole bunch of high-level athletes. The success speaks for itself. I'm going to make some broad, sweeping generalizations that may not apply to everybody. It's just my casual observations that, if I was to place an order on what people tend to love, they absolutely adore the barbell. You don't have to twist anybody's arm to get them to go into the gym and lift. Next behind that, but not close, but next would probably be some body weight stuff. And then the ugly cousin that nobody likes is, you can't bribe somebody to go to the track with you for a track day. Why is running so important, and why should maybe more athletes embrace it?
Just after nutrition, Glassman said that metabolic conditioning is the most important thing. And I think that people are losing sight of what is helping create and maximize fitness. And they're trading it off, like you said, for the things that are maybe more flamboyant, maybe more sexy in a way, right? That people love lifting heavy. And who doesn't? There's some satisfaction in it. I think that the problem with long time domain workouts in CrossFit is that people really enjoy a high intensity workout, so they forget. If you do running workouts, you have a tendency to lose yourself in your mind. It's really a cathartic process in terms of sorting out issues. That transition is tough for a lot of people, gymnasts, weightlifters, because they've never really had to do things like that while moving.
Mm-hmm. No, I don't believe it's obviously true, but a lot of people potentially neglect running because there's that silly phrase that's caught on that, you're going to lose your gains, Chris. You're going to
Oh,
lose all
yeah.
your fitness. It's just going to go out the window. But obviously, quite the opposite is true. So my question is, why is running actually beneficial and additive to being a CrossFit athlete, a high intensity, a powerful athlete?
Well, that's a great question. So, it's interesting to me that if you look at all of the great CrossFitters, the people that have won the game since, Jason Khalipa changed the sport in 2013, and you were there commentating that year, and the sport has never looked back from the elite side.
Mm-hmm.
Every champion at the CrossFit Games since 2014 has had a strong running based program. And the reason for that is because when we run, we have to support our structure. And part of what we must do is we must recognize that when we are in the gym, we are standing in almost every movement that we do. It's very similar to that of running. The problem is this, is that the average CrossFit athlete is neglecting their slow twitch muscle fibers. So as much as we love, let's say, lifting heavy, if you've neglected your slow twitch fibers, when that heavy lift occurs, those slow twitch fibers are passive, meaning they're not available to you. But when something is heavy, you want to recruit those slow twitch fibers. But part of the problem is if you have 50% of your fibers, your slow twitch fibers untrained, then the problem is those fibers won't be available to you. The reason why every athlete that has won the CrossFit Games that I've coached, and that's over 30 different wins on the top of the podium, the reason why they run 2 times per week is that they're trying to strengthen and make available their entire spectrum of fibers for when they're inside the gym, meaning that running strengthens your structurally, your standing muscle fibers, your slow twitch. And so those fibers are now more readily available, and a higher percentage of those fibers are available, which means that your lifts will actually go up. And so there is not an
So the
athlete
more
that,
fibers that you are training, the more fibers you can bring to the table, even on something like a heavy deadlift day.
absolutely. And that's the thing, is that when something's heavy, it grabs all of your available fibers. The problem is if you don't train your slow twitch fibers, and it may represent half of your arsenal of fibers, they're not available to you. This is why every elite athlete that I've ever coached has gotten stronger by having a 2-day per week running program. And I'm talking every one of them. This is Katrin
Mm-hmm.
to Froning to Fraser to Tia to Cara Webb. I mean, Sarah, the whole crew, they get stronger.
And I guess to also deflate that myth of running, you're going to lose your gains. I'm sure it's potentially possible at an extreme end that you're not even getting anywhere close to that level of volume. You're not out there 6 days a week pounding the pavement for an hour and a half. You're talking about something far, far less from a volume standpoint, and therefore it's not this fear that everybody has.
Right. So the key is like you're saying, is you got to be careful on the amount of volume that you're doing. So there is what we call the interference effect. And it's the interference effect is when you do too much of one thing, it interferes with another thing. But what Glassman really did in the creation of CrossFit is he recognized the importance of variety, not doing too much of one thing. And you ultimately create a complementary type of a training protocol where we've all seen it. I haven't done bench press in a month, and all of a sudden I hit a PR. It's
Mm-hmm.
because we have so many overlapping movements, but we don't overdo one particular movement so that it interferes with another.
I feel like I'm in a constant state of trying to make that point with people.
Yeah,
It is the wonders of variance, and there's that line which is very true. It's an oversimplification. There's a fine line between variance and bad programming. That varying doesn't mean random. Vary doesn't mean just throw at the wall and see what sticks. But intelligently designed and properly planned variance is is absolutely almost mind-boggling with what it can produce athletically anyway.
I mean, that's the thing, is that what we're trying to do, and CrossFit set that standard. We're trying to maximize adaptation in that most efficient and effective way. And so what happened in CrossFit in the early years, in '06 and '07 and '08, is that we saw dramatic physical athletic improvements in a very short amount of time. But what we're continuing to do within the sport is to maximize the experience of the athlete that's walking in the door. We have to respect their available time. And so you can't just pull out of a hopper and hope that we've maintained that the integrity of where we're trying to go with the individual that walks in the door. And that is maximal adaptation in that most efficient way. We have to value time.
Yes.
That's key.
When we chatted yesterday, you touched on something which I loved, and I scratched it down in my hand scratch notes. I could barely read it today. I'm going to have you hit it again for my benefit and for everybody else's. When we were talking specifically about the benefits of running, and you mentioned two areas, and one of them was a neural adaptation regarding speed, and then there was a second one. So could you dive into, I'm sure there's multiple benefits, but the two primary ones in your mind as to why running is critical?
So running fast, and we can define fast in a little bit, but fast is what I would consider high intensity training. There is a physiological adaptation, but talking about what you had mentioned, so the neurological side, one of the things that the brain must do is send a signal to the muscles to make them move. And the faster you can send that signal, the faster that you will be able to recruit these fibers in the particular movement that you're doing. This is very important when we do things that are fast twitch, high intensity work. We need to improve the speed that we're actually sending and receiving of that signal. So running fast it's really a plyometric. And what we're talking about is when your foot, in order to run fast, when it hits the ground, we want to try and get it off the ground as quickly as we possibly can. If you don't practice that, the brain will send the signal the long way down to your feet. And what you will have is a very slow reaction time. So plyometrics, the whole purpose of them is to improve your reaction time. If you do that in the movement of running, you get faster. So a lot of people, what they need to do is they need to work on speed to improve their reaction time in the movement of running. Now,
how would you do that?
So what we want to do is we want to start out by looking at short, very short. So what we're talking about is 8 to 10 second sprints.
Okay.
But in the beginning, you want to do it with a movement that requires strength. So a hill sprint. So what I'm talking about is a steep grade for 8 to 10 second sprint with a full recovery in between. You could push a sled, pull a sled.
Sounds miserable and beautiful.
No, it's terrible. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to maximize the recruitment of those fast twitch fibers. So you're training by using strength, a hill, a sled, to maximize that recruitment. Now, what you're doing is instead of getting a small percentage of fast twitch recruitment, you're getting a larger percentage. So the brain's never going to free up 100% of your fibers. It always sets some in reserve. But what you're trying to do with these hill sprints initially is to free up a larger percentage. Once you free up the larger percentage, now what we do is we train them to endure. So running uphill is the safest way to start, but you eventually have to migrate to flat sprinting. Why? Because we're trying to increase the rate of speed that we're actually having to send this signal. This becomes the second phase, that what you've done is you've done strength endurance, right? Something that requires strength and that requirement to endure. And now what we do is we convert it to pure speed, flat ground speed. And then we take it and we work on, after recruiting those fibers, the ability to endure, meaning we push the longer time domains up to 30 seconds. to keep those fibers turned on. This brings up the second major reason why you want to do high intensity sprinting. If you don't, what's going to happen is you're going to overload those running fibers with fatigue, lactic acid. So we have lactate in these fatigue causing properties, this acidity. That acidity is going to continue to build and build and build until it eventually shuts down your muscle fibers and forces you to stop. That's what you see when you see people hunched over, is that they've just built up too much of this fatigue. You need to get the body accustomed with what we call tolerance to this lactate. The greater level of tolerance you have, the less the muscles will shut down on you. And that's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to improve this tolerance. And the body, as a defense mechanism, recruits an enzyme to neutralize that fatigue. But if you never push hard enough, you never develop that ability. And this we see all the time in endurance athletes. They just don't want to hurt, but they have to. They have to have that tolerance adaptation. So that's the second reason why you really want to target speed, especially if you're an endurance specialist like myself.
So I love chatting. We've already learned and written down like 3 things. You came from an endurance background. Right now, you still have that history in you, but you're very in tune and aware of the benefits of high power activities, intensity, short sprints. Did you have that knowledge back in the days when you were doing triathlons? Were you doing short sprints to help that as well, or is that just not at all?
So I did not. And that was a mistake. So I've been tested. So I've had biopsies in my leg and my arm, and I'm 88% slow twitch muscle fiber. So I'm never going to be the strong guy in the gym. Genetically, I'm made to move fast for long amounts of time. My training back in the day was always focused on aerobic, longer time domains, lactate threshold, and I neglected 12% of my available capacity. I could have been better. And so part of me, when I look at elite level athletes and any athlete that walks in the door, is what muscle groups are they leaving behind?
Sure.
So for example, like in the movement of running, most crossfitters, they don't realize the importance of the arms. Most runners don't realize that. We should be incorporating arms only assault bike work to help this arm swing mechanics, and doing it in a variety of speeds as well. Everything from 10-second sprints to active recovery slow paces. We need to make sure that we're not neglecting certain muscle groups that can contribute to performance. And that's the very first thing that I do, is I look at a structure and what are they leaving behind? Because I don't want, let's say you, Pat, to do what I did and look back and go, I could have been better.
I have a bit of that, because from all my time in the military, whether you want to or not in the military, you're an endurance athlete.
Yes,
everything
true.
is long running, long swimming. It's more is better. It's death by volume. If 2 hours of running is good, 3 hours must be better. Nobody ever sprinted, period, end of story. I didn't get into that until I was, into CrossFit. So have you, somebody like me or athletes who came from my background, because I think a lot of people are runners, and what that means is they jog with their friends in the neighborhood. They're joggers. No one's going to the track to do 800-meter repeats until they vomit. They're out jogging with their friends.
Right. They have one running speed. Yep.
Exactly. And have you seen people with that general running background, having an unknown number of, let's say, slow twitch, but they've been predominantly developing their slow twitch? Can they get into sprinting and start to, not bring it to 50-50, but sway it a little bit more to one side or the other, or improve, I should say?
Absolutely. So it's the same thing that holds true in weightlifting, that if you increase your 1 rep lift, it makes all of the other reps longer than 1 rep. Your 2 rep becomes all of a sudden easier. Your 3 rep, your 10 rep, your 45 rep, it becomes easier because you're stronger. If you become faster, then all of your slower speeds become easier. And so a lot of times what is limiting endurance athletes is their top end speed. We refer to this as speed reserves. So you would take, let's say, your average speed for a mile, and then your maximum velocity that you could run at. And that is your reserve that you have to accelerate, or let's say sprint to the finish.
Okay.
That was like Tia's weakness. Tia's weakness was she would get beat near the end. And so what she had to do was work on not her long distance endurance training. She had to work her top end speed, her speed reserve, the differential between her finishing sprint and her running speed. Once she did that, she became untouchable in that last 30 seconds because her kick is faster than the balance of the people out there.
I was going to say, I think that's been corrected.
Yes, for sure. For sure. And that's where she has realized this importance of balance. And so, like, for example, in the military, don't you find it strange that fast twitch explosive athletes get trained like an endurance athlete? Essentially, that fast twitch athlete, if they don't do speed work, then what's going to happen is their top strength, their asset, is going to go away. If you don't provide a stimulus on those fast twitch fibers, which that fast twitch athlete, take a Neil Maddox, right? A Cole Sager. These are explosive athletes. Dan Bailey. If they don't sprint, that ability, their performance, their top priority vanishes.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it strange that in the military, they see you all as one. And a Neil Maddox should not go in on a mission that's 20 miles. This guy should be moving a lot of weight very quickly.
Mm-hmm. And luckily, I think training has significantly improved since back in the Stone Ages when I was in. We've got some talented folks there now, like, Josh Everett, Stefan Roche.
Yeah.
Luckily, there's some good folks that get it. But yeah, it was not that way when I was back in, and I just didn't know what I didn't know. I wish that I did. I could have made my life. The job still would have hurt, but it could have hurt a lot less had I trained in a way that I'm aware of now.
Don't you think, Pat? Don't you think that makes you like such a good coach now and programmers that you reflect and you said what I said? I could have been better.
Oh, sure. I mean, I could write a 300-page novel with my mistakes. So that's most of my life is trying to help people not do what I did that was dumb, and get them on a better, more efficient path. We also chatted that you said not only should everybody run, and not only should everybody run fast, but if you're over 40, you want to make sure that it's very much a use it or lose it kind of thing. So what happens post 40? Why is sprinting so important?
So after the age of, let's say, the numbers are around 34 years old, you become old in the fitness world. And the reason they classify it as at the age of 34 is that's when we start beginning to atrophy. So we begin to lose lean muscle mass. We begin to lose capacity of our heart to move blood, oxygen-rich blood. And so that happens at the age of 34 and on. And we essentially lose 1% of our aerobic capacity year over year. So when we look at athletes that are 40 plus runners, what happens is that what we see these runners shuffling. Why is it that old people shuffle? Remember, the reason why we take flight when we run, imagine if you're shooting a cannonball. Would you shoot it flat like you're running in a shuffle, or would you angle it up at a 45 degree and take flight? Well, that's the reason why sprinters angle up, is they're trying to take flight, but that requires muscle mass. So after the age of 40 to the age of 70, the average stride length gets cut by 50%.
That's a terrifying statistic.
It's incredible, right? I mean, this is another reason why the protocols of CrossFit are important. If you have an athlete that walks in the door that's over 40, this is a problem. And the reason why their speed slows and their stride length shrinks is lean muscle mass, right? They lose that lean muscle mass and they start to shrivel into a ball. they lose range of motion. So what we need to do is we need to have them on a strength-based protocol to retain muscle mass. And we also need to make sure that their heart stays efficient by doing high intensity work, by doing sprinting. And so, yeah, that
You just touched on both things. You need strength and you need conditioning, which I think is an illusion people have about CrossFit is they think it's just a conditioning program, but when properly applied, CrossFit is a strength and conditioning program, and it
that's
should be
correct.
covered there.
That's correct. And so your priorities, though, like you touched on it at 40, your priorities need to shift because I'll give you an example. I mean, for the people that are listening, my VO2 max, so volume oxygen maximum, in the movement of running back in the day was 89 to 90 milliliters per kilogram of body weight per minute. I'm now at 62. Now, 62 for a 57-year-old is still not even on the chart. But I went from the age of 28 down, when I was at 89 to 90, down to 62. Mm-hmm. And the only thing that happened to me is I got old.
It's almost 30% reduction.
Right. And that is real performance drop. And so knowing that this is coming, all we're trying to do is slow that process. So working speed, working range of motion, working your strength, because this is coming. If you're 34 and up, it's already happened.
But Chris, what's the big deal? It only takes 2 or 3 weeks to build an engine.
Yeah, isn't that something,
I love that one. I love it.
I
lift all year long, Chris, all year long, but 2 to 3 weeks out from the competition, I'll do a little track work. I'll be good to go.
I won't name, I never name names and things, but I can't tell you the number of elite CrossFit athletes that have told me in the past, I'm going to start running 6 weeks out from the games and I'll be ready. And it's like, wow, you have no idea. You just don't know. And it's changing at the top end.
Sure.
They're recognizing, here's the deal. We can improve our VO2, our ability to move and utilize oxygen by doing high intensity training. All right, we can. Now, that happens fast. We see dramatic improvements in 8 to 10 weeks. Dramatic. That's why high intensity training has such a good buzz, is because you see an immediate return on your investment.
Mm-hmm.
What takes longer is your sustainable speeds. So when we talk about VO2, that's your peak, like in the peak of Everest. That's the top. It's not a sustainable speed. So if you ever have done a VO2 test, what happens 15 seconds afterwards is you're laying on the ground. You have to slow down some below it. That is your sustainable speed, and that speed will continue forever. It doesn't matter if you're old or young, a man or a woman. That, if you train it, it will continue to improve year over year over year. But the way that people lose their sustainable speed is their peak, meaning they stop doing high intensity work, they stop doing strength-based work, and their VO2 drops. And when it falls, what does it do? It puts downward pressure on your sustainable speed, your lactate threshold. That drops. So the protocol of CrossFit is terrific in the sense that it's saying you have to do all of these different movements, but at a high intensity to keep your peak.
Mm-hmm.
If you do that, your sustainable speed, which is really all you should care about, is going to improve forever. And that's the secret.
That not only is the secret, and I think a missed opportunity, I think another missed opportunity, and maybe it's looped into that. I'll let you tell me if I'm right or wrong. But it's an area that I wasn't giving the respect it deserves, so I think I was leaving fitness on the table, so to speak. When we chatted yesterday, I'm like, I'm going to head out, I'm going to do some 200-meter repeats. And you're like, oh, what do you think you'll do the 200s in? And I had that number at the top of my head. And you're like, what will your recovery be? And I'm like, I usually just walk back to the start. I think it's about 2 minutes. And you're like, no, not I think it's about 2 minutes. What exactly is your recovery? I'm like, I don't know exactly what it is. I just kind of walk back, and when I go. And you were appalled, which I loved the fact that you were just appalled.
That was a trap.
Data
I
I
was a
wasn't
little
giving the
disappointed.
data of the recovery time the respect that it deserves. So why is not only the effort and the tracking of the sprints themselves important, but if you're not paying attention to your recovery, why is that a missed opportunity?
So we're getting into the juice of this is going to be really good. Because I don't know what you actually did in your workout. I mean, we talked about it before, and I told you that, you know, you have a great workout written because you have a defined total workout distance. You have a defined on interval, right? Your 200 meters fast. And you had a target time for your 200 meters fast. But what you weren't doing was you weren't looking at the third core variable in a workout. So we have volume, we have our speed, but we also have our recovery. Each of those three are equally important. And if you neglect monitoring your recovery, then I, as your coach, give zero credibility on your fast 200s. What I mean by that is, like, if we talk about it in terms of weightlifting, if you did a 5x5 back squat and you took, let's say, 3 minutes of rest to hit your load, the weight that you wanted to lift. Well, what if I knocked it down to 1 minute?
Right.
You would have a whole different appreciation if you were able to lift that load.
A different workout.
Right. The rest matters. And so when I was setting you up on it, it was like, you need to have the same precision in the recovery. And this is what makes writing of workouts challenging, because if, let's say, you're doing your 200-meter sprints in 45 seconds, now what I have to do is I have to program my recovery distance and my target time. Because if you don't, the integrity of your workout is now gone. You have nothing measurable. And that's another thing. If you talk about Glassman, he said you have to have workouts that are measurable. Well, you're leaving out a third of the equation.
Right. Absolutely.
Right. You can't solve your puzzle. And so part of it is that people don't respect and understand that recovery is one of the single most important measures in aerobic capacity. How fast can you recover? So, like, Pat, imagine if you did your 200 meters in 45 seconds and then you did a 100-meter recovery in 45 seconds versus a 400-meter walk as recovery.
Right.
There is a much greater appreciation for what you did. But if you don't measure your recovery, how do you know that you're not weak in recovery? Right. That concept of being weak, meaning your limitation in work capacity is your inability to recover. People don't realize that that's one of the major weaknesses in most CrossFitters. They just get tired.
You made a great point yesterday where people may think, I need to get stronger to do better. And you're like, well, maybe, but not necessarily. Maybe you just need to, when you drop the bar or come off the pull-up bar or slow down in your run, if you recovered faster, you could get back on the bar, get back on the whatever. Even if you didn't increase your 1 rep, you're recovering better, your stamina is better. And that is, again, through an opportunity lost of not paying attention to recovery times. And when I was going to go out on the runs yesterday, your advice to me was, go do your runs and just do what I consider my normal recovery. You and get a sense of what is that actually, and then you'll have a data point from which to move forward. So yesterday we were chatting. I'm like, I do the 200-meter sprint. I walk back. It takes me about 2 minutes. Of course, the word "about" doesn't mean precise at all, right? It takes me about 2 minutes, and you're like, does it? Because that's a pretty good walk. And if you're doing 100 meters in a minute, that's a pretty good. Like, are you walking quick? Or are you walking slow? I'm like, I'm walking slow. It's after the run. You're like, I don't think it's 2 minutes. I'm like, oh, Chris, it is. Trust me, it's definitely 2. So I went out yesterday with my watch, did my first, all my 200s were 36 to 37 seconds each. And then the last one, I just decided to give a little juice and did 33 on the last one. But I walked back each time. And then I looked at my watch when I walked back, 3 minutes, not 2. So I was off by 50% of my recovery.
Oh,
So, you know,
well,
in me keeping 36s and 37s with what I know is 3 minutes recovery, I could have done another 5 interval. Like it was challenging, but I was nowhere near like in danger of not hitting that time. Nowhere
right,
near. Now I don't know at 2 minutes because
right.
that's 30% less recovery than what I guess I've been doing the whole time.
Yep. And you were walking. So
Right.
part of it is like what so a lot of athletes, they're not aware of what their weakness is. You know, what's preventing people in a movement from doing more work. And it is either your speed or your strength, your power output, or it is your endurance, your cardiorespiratory endurance, right? Your breathing gets fatigued, your metabolic, your energy, but your muscular stamina, meaning your muscles get tired. So like Pat, if I was going to ask you in that workout, what was your limitation that you believe that you were experiencing? And I'm going to help you answer the question.
Thank you.
Part of it is that, is it your speed? And this gets tricky, right, for people. Or was it that you just get tired? Well, let's break it down one step further than that. Do you feel that it was your breathing, that you were gasping for air, right? It was your cardio that was limiting you. Or was it that your muscles in your legs just couldn't do any more work than that?
I don't feel it was the breathing.
Right, because I agree with you. Because your recovery was so long and so slow. So part of it is you needed to go long and slow because your focus was hitting 36 and 37 seconds for your ons.
Gotcha.
And so if you're going to end up getting better, you have to recognize that your sustainable speed is a balance between speed and volume or recovery. That's the difference between the two. And so is it really your speed that needs to be increased, right? So Julie Fouché, the reason why she needed to, you know, like what she needed to work on was her speed, not her recovery. She was great in long time domain workouts. Her limiting factor was her speed. And once she did that, her sustainable pace went up. I believe for you, if you want to improve your sustainable pace, then what you need to do is you need to be working on your recovery. You need to work on your muscular stamina, your longer time domains, more time on your feet, so that you don't feel sluggish, that you don't need as much recovery, that you can recover at a faster rate of speed. So I don't know what your mile time is, but I'm assuming based upon this that you're under 6 minutes, your maximum mile time.
I don't want to find out. It sounds
Yeah,
painful.
so let's just estimate it. So I would say you're under 6 minutes. Here's the thing. When you define a fast intensity, so when we look at CrossFit, constantly varied functional movement, high intensity, this is what you would consider to be fast. High intensity, what we're really saying is we're trying to improve aerobic capacity, your VO2, your ability to bring oxygen and utilize it as a fuel. That's what we're really saying. So the key in defining fast is what creates that adaptation in our VO2, our peak oxygen uptake. What is it required? Well, it's high intensity training. I define high intensity as any time domain that is a 6 minute time domain and shorter. That really improves your heart's ability to move oxygen and your muscles' ability to utilize that oxygen. So a 6 minute time domain. Now, for you, if you did a mile in 6 minutes, I would love to see you do this workout and do your run, slow it down to where you're doing your 200s in 45 seconds. And your ultimate goal is, because that's creating an improvement in your VO2, right? That would be considered high intensity. But I want you then to do an active recovery afterwards. So you're going to create fatigue in the 200 meters in 45 seconds. It's not going to be that difficult for you based upon how fast you ran, but we're going to challenge you in the workout in the recovery. So what I want to see is I want to see you actually do your recovery in the same amount of time that it took you to run your 200, but half of the distance. So you're going to run 200 meters in 45 seconds. And then what you're going to do is you're going to recover in the same 45 seconds, but you're going to cover 100 meters. And you're going to repeat that. So what we're doing is we're creating.
That sounds nasty.
But that's what you've changed the focus on. You're now creating difficulty. Although 45 seconds for 100 meters, it sounds slow. You do 8 of those. The problem is that if you are weak in recovery, it will expose it because you don't have enough time to clear that fatigue before your next on interval.
It's an interesting perspective, and again, it circles back to what we talked about at the beginning, which is variance, like the wonders and the benefit that comes from variance. So you have touched on something that I haven't played with, and therefore that tells me I have capacity and gains waiting for me because I haven't gone down this road yet. And so most people, what they'll do is, I got to run the 200s faster. You're actually telling me, hey, slow down. Who says that? Slow down on the 200s, and we're going to play with the rest. That's really interesting and intriguing to me, and I'm going to do this.
Because your weakness is not your speed. It's not. Your weakness is that your inability to clear fatigue at a fast recovery pace. That's your limitation. So one of the things that's interesting, so Fraser, I don't even know how long ago it was, 3 years ago, he wanted to do 25 unbroken D balls over the shoulder at 150 pounds, and he could do 13 of them. Okay, so he comes to you now with a goal. What do you work on? Is it his strength that's preventing him from doing the 25 unbroken? Well, no, it's not. He just gets tired. So now you have an athlete that says that fatigue is limiting their ability to reach their goal. So what do we work on? We work on their ability to clear fatigue. And the way that is done is our body, what it does is it, with high intensity, sprinting, heavy loads, it creates lactic acid, this lactate and these fatigue causing properties. But your slow twitch fibers, as we were talking about earlier, they consume lactate as a fuel. So your fast twitch fibers create this lactic acid, but your slow twitch fibers, and this is where the balance in the body's a terrific thing. The slow twitch aerobic fibers consume this lactate as a fuel. And when it takes the lactate and consumes it as a fuel, it grabs the acidity, the fatigue causing properties, the things that are forcing you to slow down, and it removes it from the body. So the faster that you can remove lactate in your slow twitch fibers, meaning you make those slow twitch fibers more efficient, the faster you can recover. And the interesting part is the recovery occurs while you are moving.
Right.
So essentially what you're doing is you are recovering at a higher rate of speed. So what's Fraser do? He does some heavy D balls. So let's say he does 4 heavy D balls at 150 pounds. I don't want to change that side of the equation, right? Like you on your sprint. What do I want to do? I want him to do an active recovery. So I want you to jog, Pat. I want Fraser to take a 20-pound med ball and go very slow like you do on your jog, ground to shoulder. So he's now clearing fatigue in the similar movement pattern, the same muscle groups that just created
in a similar way.
Just like you in a running sprint with the jog recovery. Now what we're doing is forcing him to clear fatigue in the same muscle groups that just created it. I want you to do 1 minute of very slow, active recovery, ground to shoulder med balls, 20 pounds, and then do that 5 rounds. Create fatigue just like you do in your running sprint, but clear it in a similar movement pattern because you just created fatigue in your running muscles. Now I want you to clear it with an active recovery jog. Now, what do you do? For example, what do you do next? Well, ultimately what I'd like to see you do is jog faster. Same thing with Fraser. So instead of 20 pounds, what do we want? Next time you do it, 25 pounds, then 30 pounds, then 40 pounds, get all the way up to 80 pounds. Then what do? I'm going to bump you up your intensity side, because now you have become, because of the volume, more efficient in the movement. Remember, volume makes you efficient. Now I'm going to improve his intensity. I'm going to bump him, instead of 150s, now at 200. So what do I do next? I drop him from 80 pounds back down to 20, and you start back over again.
And we play the game again.
But it's targeting the weakness that he identified.
But it's targeting it in a creative way that I think many of us would benefit from playing with, like, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I think that what we need to do is we need to look at the 3 qualities in the workout. And like we were saying, is like, you're hitting all 3 of them, but what we need to do is add precision to the recovery portion.
You got 3 knobs that you can tweak, and if you're not paying attention and giving all 3 of those knobs the respect they deserve, you're leaving money on the table.
That's correct. It makes it so that I don't understand then the adaptation. So like Khalifa back in the day, when the first talk I had with him, I'm like, what was your last running workout? And he says, or endurance workout. And he says, oh, I went to the track, I ran a 400 as fast as I could. And he's all, I did it in 68 seconds. And I said, what'd you do next? He says, I rested. I'm, well, how long? And he's like, well, and he didn't know. He's like, I don't know, maybe a minute, maybe 2 minutes. And then I'm all, what'd you do next? And he's all, I ran another 400 and I ran it as fast as I could. I'm like, what was your time? And he says, oh, I did that one in 74 seconds. And he says, because I was tired. Then what? He's all, well, then I rested. And he's like, you know what? I may have gone to the bathroom.
Right.
The problem is that what do you do when the variables, we don't even know what you did? Was he in a snowstorm? Was it 1,000,000 degrees outside? Was he running in sand? You have to know the variables. And so here was the thing, like looking at Khalifa, he went from 68 seconds in his first to 73, 74 seconds in his second one. So I asked him, I go, what was the purpose in this? And he says, well, I get last in every endurance event at the CrossFit Games. I'm slow. So I'm also, you were training speed? And he's all, yeah. I'm like, okay, so, well, when we focus on speed, then we don't care really about a recovery. We want to measure it, but what's the focus? It's to maximize speed. So I could take as much recovery time.
So you take as much as you need.
Just like a 5x5.
But measure it.
Right. Just like a 5x5 back squat. If your focus is the load, then measure your recovery. But if you want to take 5 minutes, take it, because it's not the priority. The problem was this, is that Jason was training speed, but when you looked at it, what did he say? I went as fast as I could, energy, maximal energy on the first. Second one, fast as I could, maximal energy. So that's his metabolic pathways. But what did his muscles learn to do? You have to always remember you're training 2 things, your energy and your muscles. His muscles hurt real bad. And then here they hurt real bad, but he trained them to go slow. So what should he have done in between the first and the second one? He should have taken more rest if his focus was speed.
And ideally kept moving to some degree.
Absolutely. So part of it is that we know that the fastest way to recover when you are after a high intensity interval is to do nothing, because you want to lower the heart rate. So it doesn't matter if you're at your peak output in about 90 seconds, you have recovered enough where you can now actively move. So if you're trying to maximize speed, then you want to recover by doing nothing, but then you want to actually start moving, because you want to start taking the lactate that is in your bloodstream and in your muscles and consume it as a fuel and get it out of your body. Because if you don't, when you do the next interval, you're starting with a preload of lactic acid. You're pre-fatigued. So now you're going to hit the wall sooner.
So you're starting in a deficit. Why would you want to do that?
That's correct. Unless you're intentionally designing a workout, which is, you know what? A lactate tolerance workout is one where you deny the athlete sufficient recovery time, but you tell them to maintain their speed. So what happens is they build up more and more lactate. And what you're telling them is, you do not quit. You fight to keep the muscles turned on under high amounts of fatigue so that your body secretes this enzyme so that you're more capable at higher levels of intensity. That is a trainable adaptation. But the athlete would need to know that the end is coming. So if you're doing, let's say, 30-second hill sprints with insufficient recovery time, you're going to mark your distance on the first one, and you will never see that distance again. You'll continue to get slower and slower.
Right.
That's a tolerance workout. By design, you're telling the athlete you're going to get slower.
I love it.
Yeah.
So some of the stuff you were saying about just the different ways to play with the work, the speed, the recovery is very reminiscent to a very old CrossFit Journal article. There's some interesting parallels, I think back from like 2002 or 3 or something. And it's called something along the lines of strategies for a 7-minute 2K row. And it talks about, if you're just trying to attack it by every day I'm going to get in the rower and pull as hard as I can for 2K. It's like, you might get there, but it's by no means the most efficient, well-versed,
right.
Variance way to get there. And you have a much higher chance of obtaining that goal if you look at all the different variables that you can control and play with. And so, I need to blow the dust off that. And this has been illuminating, to say the least. I appreciate it, Chris. You are a wealth of knowledge. I hope more people get fired up about running. I hope they go to your page. I hope they go to your course. And
thanks, man. I appreciate that.
We'll have to do this again.
I'm so grateful for our talks, and it's nice to be able to be friends, and that's what makes this community so special, right? Is that, we've known each other since 2013, and when you were reporting on Kalipa, and I'm just so grateful. And so to be able to talk about different ideas and you being receptive. I mean, that's one of the universals that you've had, is that you've always been receptive. And in some cases, I'm saying things that you're not quite understanding, but what I'm trying to tell you is important. And so you try and unravel it. And I wish more people did that, because when you have dialogue, you're adjusting your intellect, but I'm also adjusting mine to where you are, so we can communicate. And that calibration sometimes is challenging.
Sure, absolutely. And you have to be, in my opinion, we're all doing what we do, grinding every day, and you can be in your world, in your bubble. And if you don't get outside of it every now and then and chat with people, and if you don't think there's something to learn with darn near every human being that crosses your path, because everyone's had a little bit of a different life experience, and if you have an open and honest conversation, you let your ego down, and you're receptive to saying, I don't know everything, I'm going to listen a lot more than I talk. So, you're going to get value from the conversation. And that's, anyway, we could have another rant. I love them. And I look forward to when COVID's over, we'll go get a cup of coffee if our paths cross.
Well, you're in one of my favorite places, so yeah.
Let me know, man. If you come to the Great Pacific Northwest, I'll be here. But
once again, well, thank you, man.
Chris, I appreciate it, brother.
Thank you. Same. All right, Pat. Take it easy.
Have a good day.
Yep, you too. Bye.